I swear, you'll never see me again," Isabella shouted, signing the divorce papers. Sebastian smirked with contempt. Perfect. One less woman to take care of. 3 years later, he entered the most exclusive restaurant in the city, and what he saw stunned him forever. A black Bentley Continental GT smoothly pulled up and stopped in front of Palazzo di Cristallo, the most exclusive and expensive restaurant in the entire city. Sebastian Mendoza adjusted his platinum Patek Philippe watch as the doorman rushed to take the keys. At his age, he was the living embodiment of business success. Owner of the largest hotel chain in the country, with a fortune exceeding $300 million, and a reputation that preceded him in every elite circle. "Good evening, Sir Mendoza," the doorman greeted him with an almost exaggerated bow. "It's an honor to see you in our establishment again." Sebastian nodded with that cold, calculated smile he had honed over years of ruthless negotiations. His Armani suit, costing $15,000, fit perfectly on his athletic figure, which he maintained with a personal trainer who cost him more per month than most people's annual salary. Every step he took echoed with the authority of a man who had never known the meaning of the word no. This evening was special. He had just closed the most important deal of his career, acquiring a competing chain that made him a complete monopolist in the luxury tourism industry across 3 countries. It was time to celebrate, and he had invited Victoria Ramirez, a 28-year-old model he met at a charity event the previous week. A beautiful, refined woman, and above all, impressed by his wealth. The interior of Palazzo di Cristallo was the true embodiment of luxury. Murano crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling. The walls were adorned with original works by European masters, and each table was decorated with fresh flowers flown in daily from Holland. The prices were just as exclusive. One dinner could cost more than the monthly salary of 3 average families. Sir Mendoza, the maitre d', approached with an obliging smile. "Your usual table is ready. Are we expecting anyone else this evening?" "Yes, Señorita Ramirez will arrive any minute now." "Make sure everything is perfect," Sebastian replied in that same commanding tone he had developed over years of managing hundreds of employees. As he was escorted to the VIP area table, Sebastian felt on top of the world. 3 years had passed since their divorce. 3 years during which he had multiplied his fortune. He had dated the most beautiful women on the continent and achieved everything he desired. Isabella had been just a temporary obstacle on his path to greatness, a lesson that feelings shouldn't mix with business. He settled into the Italian leather chair, gazing out the window at the city lights that practically belonged to him. His empire stretched along the entire coast, from 5-star hotels to private resorts where the world's powerful rested and closed deals. He was equally respected, feared, and envied. "Would you like the wine list, sir?" a waiter asked quietly. "A bottle of Stoptrus 1998, he replied without even glancing at the young man. "And ensure the temperature is perfect." Sebastian pulled out his gold phone and checked his messages. Victoria had texted that she was delayed a few minutes due to traffic. Perfect. That gave him time to review emails from his international managers and confirm tomorrow's meeting in Paris. As he replied to messages about the construction of a new hotel in Monaco, a figure approached his table with a bottle of wine. Reflexively, he looked up to check the label was correct. And that's when his world came to a complete halt. The gold phone slipped from his hands and clattered to the floor with a metallic sound, like a gong in the sudden silence that gripped his mind. Isabella. Isabella Morales stood before him, holding the bottle of wine with hands that trembled, though almost imperceptibly. She wore the restaurant's uniform. An impeccable white blouse, a black knee-length skirt, and an apron that couldn't hide what he noticed immediately, and what hit him like a punch to the heart. She was pregnant. Very pregnant. Her rounded belly was impossible to miss, even under the uniform, probably the 7th month. Her face had changed. The youthful softness he remembered was gone, replaced by tired features and a pallor that spoke of sleepless nights and constant worries. Her hair, which used to be impeccably styled in expensive salons, was now tied in a simple, practical ponytail. But what struck him most were her eyes. Those same green eyes that once looked at him with unconditional love now gazed at him with a mix of shock, humiliation, and something that seemed like pure panic fear. "Would you like me to open the bottle, sir?" Isabella asked in a voice trying to sound professional but trembling at the edges. Sebastian was paralyzed. His mind, usually capable of processing information at lightning speed to make million-dollar decisions, simply shut down. He couldn't comprehend what he was seeing. Isabella, his Isabella, the woman he had thrown out of his life like trash 3 years ago, standing before him, pregnant and waiting tables. Memories crashed over him like an avalanche. Isabella at their wedding, radiant in a $50,000 dress, vowing eternal love. Isabella in his penthouse, making breakfast on Sunday mornings, softly humming while preparing his coffee just the way he liked it. Isabella crying on that last night, begging him to think about children, about starting a family. "Business is my priority," he had said coldly then. "A child would be an expensive and unnecessary hindrance. If you can't understand that, you're not the woman for me." And now she stood here, clearly expecting the child he had refused to have with her, working in a place where one tip might exceed her weekly income. "Sir?" Isabella repeated, her voice more strained, realizing that other customers and staff were starting to notice the strange tension at the table. "Would you like me to open the bottle?" Sebastian tried to speak, but the words stuck in his throat. How had Isabella come to this? After the divorce, he had ensured she got a decent settlement. He hadn't been generous, but he hadn't left her on the street. What happened to that money? Who was the father of the child she was carrying? "One eye," Sebastian muttered, feeling like a nervous teenager for the first time in decades. Isabella took advantage of his confusion to tilt her head slightly, a gesture that to any outsider might seem professional, but he recognized it as a silent plea. "Please, don't make a scene. Not here, not now." At that moment, a cheerful voice rang out from the restaurant entrance. "Sebastian. Sorry I'm late, the traffic was awful." Victoria was approaching the table like a vision from another dimension, in a designer dress that probably cost more than Isabella earned in half a year, with jewelry sparkling in the restaurant's light, and the confidence that only comes to people who don't know real financial worries. Isabella saw the approaching Victoria, and something changed in her expression. The fleeting vulnerability was replaced by a mask of professional dignity that broke Sebastian's heart in a way he couldn't explain. "Excuse me," Isabella said firmly. "I'll send another waiter to serve you today." She turned to leave, but Sebastian, driven by an uncontrollable impulse, reached out and grabbed her hand. "Isabella, wait." She turned back, and for just a moment, he saw in her eyes the same pain and betrayal she had carried for all those 3 years. But then Victoria arrived at the table. "Is everything okay, darling?" she asked curiously, looking at the scene. Sebastian holding the hand of a pregnant waitress who looked like she was about to flee. Isabella gently freed her hand from his grip and addressed Victoria with perfect professional politeness. "Everything is fine, señorita. Enjoy your dinner." Without giving Sebastian a chance to say another word, she walked away toward the kitchen, taking with her the fragile emotional balance he had so meticulously built over the last 3 years. Victoria sat down at the table, completely unaware that her companion had just experienced a personal earthquake. "Do you know that waitress? It seemed like you were acquainted," she remarked casually, flipping through the menu. Sebastian looked at her as if she was speaking an unfamiliar language. His mind was still processing the image of Isabella, pregnant, tired, working in a place where he spent in one evening what she probably earned in several months. He didn't automatically lie. "I don't know her." But while Victoria cheerfully talked about her shopping and plans for the weekend on the yacht, Sebastian couldn't tear his gaze from the kitchen, hoping to catch another glimpse of the figure that had vanished but left his world completely shattered. For the first time in 3 years, Sebastian Mendoza, the man who controlled empires and moved millions with a single call, felt utterly lost. And worst of all, he didn't understand why it mattered so much to him. The dinner turned into an exquisite torture. Sebastian pretended to listen as Victoria recounted her latest photo shoot in Milan, but his eyes desperately searched for any sign of Isabella among the waiters bustling back and forth. Every time a female figure appeared in his peripheral vision, his heart raced, only to sink again upon realizing it wasn't her. "Sebastian, are you listening to me?" Victoria stopped talking and looked at him with slight irritation and concern. "You've been acting strange since the beginning. Did something happen at work?" "Sorry, darling," Sebastian forced a smile, that same charming smile with which he closed multimillion-dollar deals. "Just digesting the details of the contract I closed today. It's a big step for the company." Victoria smiled, apparently satisfied with the explanation. After all, she was used to the influential men she dated always being preoccupied with money and business. It was part of their appeal. But Sebastian wasn't thinking about contracts. He was replaying every second of those few minutes with Isabella in his head, analyzing every detail as if it were evidence in a criminal case. The way her hands trembled, the pallor of her face, the circles under her eyes that even makeup couldn't hide. And above all, that rounded belly screaming a truth he didn't want to acknowledge. Isabella had moved on. She had found someone else. She had realized the dream of a family that he himself had destroyed. You know what? Victoria leaned toward him with a flirtatious smile. After dinner, we can go to your penthouse. I have a surprise for you. Under normal circumstances, Sebastian would have been thrilled. Victoria was exactly the type of woman who attracted him. Beautiful, refined, without emotional complications. But tonight, the very thought of intimacy with anyone else seemed impossible to him. His mind was completely consumed by the image of Isabella disappearing behind the kitchen door. Of course, he lied, raising his glass of wine. Let's drink to surprises. But as Victoria smiled and clinked glasses with him, Sebastian made a decision that would forever change the course of this evening. Excuse me for a minute, he stood up. I need to make an important call. I'll be right back. Before Victoria could object, Sebastian headed to the depths of the restaurant. His heart pounded as if he had run a marathon. He hadn't planned this, didn't know what he was going to say, but his body moved on its own. The kitchen. He stopped in front of the kitchen doors, the barrier separating the elegant world of the dining room from the harsh reality of the kitchen. Through the round glass in one of the doors, he saw the interior. Chefs rushing back and forth, waiters assembling dishes, the organized chaos of a high-end restaurant kitchen in full swing. And then he saw her. Isabella was sitting on a small stool in the corner, one hand supporting her lower back, the other holding a glass of water. Her face clearly showed exhaustion, and for a moment, she closed her eyes as if gathering strength to continue. Sebastian felt as if a knife had pierced his chest. The woman who once lived in a luxurious penthouse had access to the best spas and private doctors, who never had to think about anything except choosing the next designer dress, was now clearly struggling to stay on her feet during her shift. Without thinking, he pushed the door and entered the kitchen. The noise and chaos hit him immediately. The heat from the stoves, the sound of chopping knives, the shouts of chefs giving orders. Several employees looked at him in surprise and concern. Customers were definitely not allowed in the kitchen. Sir, you can't be here, one of the sous chefs quickly approached, wiping his hands on his apron. But Sebastian ignored him. His eyes were fixed on Isabella, who looked up at the commotion and now stared at him with an expression of absolute horror. Isabella, he said, and his own voice sounded strange to him, filled with emotion he didn't know how to handle. She immediately stood up, with an effort that was painful to watch, and approached him, her face flushed with embarrassment. Sebastian, you can't be here, she whispered insistently, aware that all the staff were watching them. Please, leave. I need to talk to you, he replied, completely ignoring the curious stares and indignant voices of the personnel. Not here. Not now. Isabella grabbed his arm stronger than he expected and led him to the back door leading to the alley. Do you want me to get in trouble? I need this job. They stepped out into the fresh night air, and for the first time in 3 years, they were completely alone. The contrast was overwhelming. A dirty, poorly lit alley versus the luxury of the restaurant they had just left. Isabella leaned against the brick wall, breathing heavily, one hand instinctively covering her belly. What do you want, Sebastian? She asked, and her voice carried a hardness he had never heard before. Did you come to laugh? To make sure you were right about me? I didn't know you worked here. Sebastian felt like an idiot, muttering incoherent words. I didn't know you were pregnant. Isabella laughed bitterly, and that laugh broke his heart. Of course you didn't know. Why would you? 3 years ago, you made it very clear you didn't want to know anything more about my life. The memories of that last night returned like knife wounds. Isabella crying, begging him to reconsider the divorce. He, cold as ice, handing her the already prepared papers and saying she could sign voluntarily, or his lawyers would ensure she got nothing. I gave you money in the divorce, Sebastian muttered. I gave you enough to live on for several years. Isabella's expression hardened even more. Money in the divorce? You mean those 50,000 you gave me after 5 years of marriage? After I built my entire life around yours? Sebastian felt as if he had been slapped in the face. In his mind, 50,000 seemed a generous sum. For him, it was weekend expenses. But now, Looking at the pregnant Isabella working as a waitress, he realized how ridiculously inadequate that amount was. Isabella, I thought. Thought what? She interrupted, and for the first time, tears were in her eyes. Thought that with that money I could live the rest of my life? Thought that after 5 years as your wife, when my only job was to be perfect for your business events, I could easily find work? Sebastian was speechless. During their marriage, Isabella had quit her job as an art teacher to fully dedicate herself to being the perfect wife. She organized his events, decorated their homes, accompanied him to every important social gathering. He had never considered how difficult it would be for her to rebuild her career after the divorce. What month are you in? He asked, changing the subject because he couldn't bear the weight of his own guilt. Isabella involuntarily touched her belly. 7.5. Sebastian quickly calculated in his mind. That meant she had gotten pregnant less than 6 months after the divorce. The thought that Isabella had been with another man so soon after their separation caused him pain he couldn't understand. Who's the father? He asked before he could stop himself. Isabella looked at him as if he had slapped her. That's none of your business. I just want to know if he's taking good care of you, Sebastian insisted, though he knew he had no right to ask. If you need help. Help? Isabella laughed bitterly again. Now you want to help? Where was that care when you left me with nothing and said you never wanted to see me again? Sebastian ran his hands through his hair in frustration. Isabella, I didn't know. If I had known things were this bad, then what would you have done? She challenged. Sent more money to ease your conscience? Hired someone to handle the problem for you? I don't know, he admitted, and the honesty of his answer surprised them both. Isabella studied him silently for a while in the dim light of the alley. Sebastian could see the fatigue lines around her eyes, how she held her back, her swollen feet squeezed into the cheap uniform shoes. You know what's the saddest part of all this? Isabella asked softly. Not that I'm pregnant and working as a waitress. Not that I live in a one-room apartment that costs half as much as you spent on wine each month. The saddest part is that for 5 years, I truly believed you loved me. Those words hit Sebastian like a hammer to the chest. Isabella, I did love you. No, she shook her head. You loved the idea of me. A beautiful wife who looked good on your arm at balls, smart enough to hold interesting conversations with your partners, but not ambitious enough to compete with you. But you never loved me. At that moment, the restaurant's back door opened, and an older man in a suit appeared, the manager. Isabella, they're looking for you in the hall. And you, sir, he looked disapprovingly at Sebastian, need to return to your companion. Clients aren't allowed in staff areas. Sebastian wanted to argue, wanted to demand more time, more answers, but the panic on Isabella's face stopped him. Please, she whispered. Don't make me lose this job. It's all I have. Without another word, Isabella went back inside, leaving Sebastian alone in the alley with more questions than answers and a pain in his chest he didn't know how to get rid of. When he returned to the table, Victoria looked at him with an impatient expression. Where were you? Your food is getting cold. Sebastian sat down and looked at his $200 dish, about as much as Isabella probably earned in a whole night of work. For the first time in his life, the luxury surrounding him seemed obscene. Victoria, he said suddenly, I think we should leave. But as he paid with his Black Unlimited card, a plan was already forming in his head. This meeting was far from over. Sebastian didn't sleep that night. Nor the next, nor the one after. From his $20 million penthouse with a panoramic view of the entire city, he sat until dawn, staring out the window at the twinkling lights below. Somewhere among those lights was Isabella, probably in a small, cheap apartment, trying to sleep with a 7th-month belly and worrying about this month's bills. That image haunted him. For 3 years, he had convinced himself he had done the right thing. That their marriage was a mistake. That Isabella was too emotional, too dependent, too human for the world he lived in. He told himself she'd be better off without him, that she'd find someone better suited to her needs. But seeing her in that restaurant shattered all his justifications. Ser Mendoza, the voice of Carmen, his personal assistant, snapped him out of his thoughts. It's 10:30. Your meeting with the Japanese investors is in an hour. Sebastian turned from the window, realizing he was still in yesterday's clothes. Carmen looked at him with professional but restrained concern. In 5 years working for him, she had never seen him in such a state. Cancel the meeting, Sebastian said, his voice hoarse from lack of sleep. Sir? Carmen blinked in surprise. But this is the contract for the hotel in Tokyo. They flew in specifically to negotiate with Robert. Tell them I have a family emergency. Carmen opened her mouth to object, but something in Sebastian's expression stopped her. In 5 years, he had never cancelled an important meeting, never put anything above business, and certainly never mentioned family. Is there anything else I can do for you, sir? She asked cautiously. Sebastian stared at her for a long time. Carmen was efficient, discreet, and had shown absolute loyalty over the years. If anyone could help him, it was her. I need you to find out something, he finally said. But it's absolutely confidential. Not a word to anyone, not even Robert. Carmen nodded, pulling out her tablet. Of course, Sarah. What do you need to know? Isabella Morales. 3 years ago, her last name was Mendoza. I need to know where she lives, her exact financial situation, where she's worked since the divorce. And most importantly, he paused, I need to know everything about the man who got her pregnant. Carmen typed quickly, asking no questions. She was too professional for that, but Sebastian noticed the curiosity in her eyes. How urgently do you need this information? By this evening, Sebastian nodded. Carmen headed to the door, but he stopped her. Carmen, one more thing. I also need medical information. I want to know if everything is okay with her and the child. This time, Carmen couldn't fully hide her surprise but limited herself to a nod and left the office. Sebastian spent the rest of the morning pacing his penthouse like a caged animal. He tried to work but couldn't concentrate. He tried to call Victoria, but the mere thought of pretending to be interested in her superficial chatter made him nauseous. He tried to go to the gym, but every rep on the bench reminded him of Isabella supporting her aching back. At 3 o'clock sharp, Carmen returned with a thick folder and an expression Sebastian couldn't interpret. It wasn't quite sympathy, nor professional indifference. What did you find out? Sebastian asked immediately. Carmen sat across from his desk, clearly uncomfortable with what she had to report. Sir Mendoza, this is complicated. Sebastian braced for the worst. Tell me everything. Isabella Morales lives in a 1-bedroom apartment in the San Miguel district. Rent is $800 a month, including utilities. She works at Palazzo di Cristallo 5 nights a week, earning $12 an hour plus tips. She also cleans houses in the Las Lomas district on weekends. Each word hit like a slap. Sebastian quickly calculated. Isabella earned in a month less than he spent on one business dinner. The child's father? He asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know. Carmen opened the folder and pulled out several documents. This is where it gets most painful. What do you mean? The child's father is Diego Herrera, an architect, 35 years old. Isabella started a relationship with him about 8 months after the divorce. From my sources, it was a serious relationship. He proposed to her when he found out about the pregnancy. Sebastian felt as if a knife had been plunged into his chest and slowly twisted. Isabella had moved on. She had found love again. She had almost remarried. What happened? He asked, tension in his voice. Carmen looked at him with something like sympathy. Diego Herrera had a secret. He was married. Married for 8 years, with 2 young children. Married. Isabella didn't know. She found out the truth when she was 5 months pregnant. His legal wife showed up at her home. Sebastian closed his eyes, imagining the scene. Isabella, pregnant, full of hopes for a new life, suddenly learning that the man she loved had deceived her all along. And what did he do? He said it was all a mistake, that he never intended to leave his family. He offered money to solve the problem, and when Isabella refused, he declared he wanted nothing to do with the child. Carmen paused. That was 2 months ago. He hasn't contacted her since. The information crashed over Sebastian like an avalanche. Isabella had found love after him. She had built hopes for a new family, only to be deceived again. And now she was alone, pregnant, working herself to exhaustion to survive. There's more, Carmen continued, checking her notes. Isabella goes to a public clinic for prenatal checkups because she can't afford private health insurance. She's had some minor complications. High blood pressure, anemia, likely due to stress and overwork. Complications? Sebastian immediately grew alarmed. Is the child okay? According to the medical records, both she and the child are fine now, but the doctors recommended reducing work hours and stress levels. Obviously, that's impossible given her financial situation. Carmen pulled out more documents. I also learned something about her situation after the divorce. What exactly? Isabella tried to return to teaching, but most private schools wouldn't hire her because she'd been out of the profession for 5 years. Public schools have huge waiting lists. In the end, she took service jobs in stores, cafes. When her pregnancy became noticeable, many employers fired her under various pretexts. Sebastian stood up abruptly and walked to the window. Why didn't she come to me? Why didn't she ask for help when Diego left her? Carmen gave him a strange look. Sarah, do you remember your last words to her? Sebastian vividly recalled that last night. If you have problems in life, that's not my problem. You chose to leave. Now live with the consequences. It had been so cruel, so final. How could Isabella come for help after that? There's one more thing, Carmen said softly. Something I found in the hospital documentation. What? In the medical records, Isabella listed your name as the emergency contact. Sebastian turned sharply. What? She has no family here, Sarah. Her parents died many years ago. No siblings. No one. When asked who to notify in case of an emergency during childbirth, she listed your name and your office number. The ensuing silence was deafening. Sebastian felt as if all the air had left the room. Why would she do that? He whispered, more to himself than to Carmen. Perhaps, Carmen suggested cautiously, despite everything, you're still the most important person in her life. Sebastian sank into his chair, overwhelmed by emotions he didn't know how to handle. Isabella had been betrayed by 2 men. First by him, who cruelly abandoned her. Then by Diego, who deceived and left her pregnant. And yet, when she needed to name someone she trusted in a critical situation, she named him. What do I do now, Carmen? He asked, and for the first time in years, his voice sounded vulnerable, human. That depends on you, Sarah. But if you'll allow a personal remark. Speak. In 5 years working for you, I've never seen anything touch you that's not related to business. Isabella Morales is the only person who makes you act like a real human, not a money-making machine. Sebastian looked at Carmen in surprise. She had never spoken to him so directly. What do you suggest? I suggest you go to her. But not as the millionaire savior rescuing a damsel in distress. Go as the man who still loves her and wants a chance to be better than he was before. Sebastian stood up with a determination he hadn't felt in years. You're right. But first, do something for me. Anything. Contact the best private obstetrician in the city, Dr. Ramirez from San Rafael Hospital. Schedule an appointment for Isabella, under a different name if necessary. I want you to pay her rent for the next 6 months, anonymously. If she refuses help, I'll find another way. Sebastian spoke as he headed to the door. But I won't let the woman I love raise a child in poverty when I have the power to change it. Carmen was silent for a few seconds. Sarah, are you sure you want to do this? Isabella isn't just an ex-wife who's pregnant and in need. She's a woman betrayed by 2 men, a woman fighting to maintain her dignity while raising a child alone. If you're going to re-enter her life, you have to be ready to stay. She won't survive a 3rd betrayal. Sebastian froze at the door, pondering her words. For 3 years, he had lived thinking he needed no one, that love was weakness, and family a distraction from important matters. But seeing Isabella pregnant and struggling alone shattered all those beliefs. Carmen, for 3 years I was the richest and most miserable man in the country. I had everything money could buy, and I wasn't happy for a single day. But in those 5 minutes I talked to Isabella in that alley, I felt alive like I hadn't in years. He opened the door and turned to Carmen one last time. I'm going to get my family back. Not the one we had, but the one I should have built if I hadn't been such an idiot and prideful. And the fact that the child isn't yours? Carmen asked. Sebastian smiled for the first time in days, but it was a different smile, not the cold, calculated smile of a ruthless businessman. It was the smile of a man who had finally found something worth fighting for. Carmen, this child is growing up without a father because a coward abandoned him. If Isabella gives me a chance, I'll be the best father a man can be, regardless of who biologically conceived him. As the elevator took him to the parking garage, Sebastian no longer thought about multimillion-dollar contracts or business empires. He thought about Isabella mopping floors in the 7th month of pregnancy. He thought about her crying alone in her apartment when Diego left her. He thought about how she listed his name as the emergency contact because she had no one else. But most of all, he thought about the opportunity life had given him to become the man he should have been from the start. The war to win back Isabella had begun, and this time, he wasn't going to lose. Sebastian arrived at Palazzo di Cristallo at 7:30, but this time he didn't come in his black Bentley with a driver. He left the luxury car at home and took a taxi, understanding that showing up in all his opulence would be the opposite of what was needed. Today, he wasn't the millionaire businessman coming to an elite restaurant. He was a desperate man trying to win back the woman he had lost through his own stupidity. He stood on the sidewalk for a full 10 minutes, watching through the restaurant windows for Isabella among the waiters elegantly moving between tables. His heart pounded so hard he could hear it over the street noise. He had no plan. He hadn't rehearsed what to say. He just knew he couldn't spend another night knowing what he knew now and doing nothing. When he finally saw her, his legs nearly buckled. Isabella was serving a group of businessmen, smiling professionally as she took their order. But Sebastian saw more than just the professional mask. He saw how she discreetly held her back when she thought no one was looking. He saw the fatigue in her eyes, how she had applied too much foundation to hide the circles under them. He saw her belly, now more pronounced when she turned in profile. She was carrying the child of a man who had abandoned her without looking back. "Do you have a reservation?" The maitre d' asked when Sebastian entered the restaurant. "No, but..." Sebastian began, then stopped. He couldn't use his name. Isabella worked here. If her colleagues found out that billionaire Sebastian Mendoza was here because of her, it could cause problems for her. "Could you give me a table in the section served by that waitress?" He discreetly pointed to Isabella. The maitre d' followed his gaze and frowned slightly. "Sir, Isabella is serving the VIP section today. The minimum bill there is $500. "Perfect," Sebastian replied immediately, pulling out his wallet. 10 minutes later, he was sitting at a table for two in Isabella's section, pretending to study the menu while actually studying her every gesture. How she moved slower than usual, how she took deep breaths before lifting heavy trays, how she smiled at customers with genuine professional politeness, but the smile vanished as soon as she thought no one was watching. Isabella hadn't noticed him yet. She was busy with a table of 6 that clearly kept her running back and forth with endless requests. Sebastian watched with growing indignation as one of the men snapped at her for bringing sparkling water instead of still, and how Isabella apologized over and over, hurrying to fix the mistake. When she finally finished with that table and headed toward him, Sebastian saw the moment she recognized him. Her step slowed, her posture tensed, and a flash of panic crossed her face before she could hide it. She approached his table with the same professional expression as the night before, but Sebastian noticed how her hands trembled slightly as she held her notepad. "Good evening," she said in a carefully controlled voice. "Can I offer you something to drink?" "Isabella," Sebastian said softly, "we need to talk." "I'm working," she replied quickly, her eyes nervously darting around the room, checking on colleagues. "If you'd like to order." "I found out everything," he interrupted, and he saw her eyes widen in shock. "I know about Diego. I know what he did to you." Isabella's face went completely pale. The notepad slipped from her hands and clattered to the floor, causing several people to turn. "You can't talk about this here," she whispered desperately, bending to pick up the notepad. "Please, Sebastian, they'll fire me." "Then come with me." Sebastian stood up. "Let's go somewhere we can talk privately." "I can't leave my shift," Isabella protested, but her voice was starting to crack. "I need this job. I need every cent." "For what?" He interrupted. "To pay for rent in a terrible neighborhood? To buy cheap food that doesn't give you the nutrition you need? To get treated at a public clinic where you're handled like cattle?" Isabella looked at him as if he had slapped her. "How dare you? How dare you pry into my personal life? Who gave you the right?" "What gives me the right is that I love you," Sebastian exploded, his voice loud enough for several tables to turn. The ensuing silence was deafening. Isabella froze, staring at him with an expression of complete shock. "Señorita Isabella," the restaurant manager's voice cut through the tension like a knife. "Are you having some problems?" Isabella turned to the manager, clearly panicking. "No," Sir Ramirez, everything's fine. The Sir is just. The Sir is leaving right now, Sebastian said firmly, placing a $100 bill on the table. But first, I'd like to talk to you about Isabella. With me. Sir Ramirez looked puzzled. Do you know that Isabella is pregnant, 7.5 months along? Of course I know, the manager replied with a hint of defensiveness in his voice. And do you know that the doctors recommended she reduce her work hours due to complications related to stress? Sir Ramirez looked at Isabella in surprise. Is that true? Isabella opened her mouth to respond, but Sebastian continued. And do you know she's working 2 jobs because the salary here isn't enough even for basic expenses? Sir, the manager now looked uncomfortable. I don't know who you are, but labor issues for our employees. I'm Sebastian Mendoza, Sebastian said, and he saw the manager tense upon hearing the name. And Isabella is my ex-wife. If it had been quiet before, now there was complete silence. Sebastian noticed how other employees and customers were trying to eavesdrop discreetly. He saw the complete confusion on Isabella's face. My ex-wife, who is now pregnant and working herself to exhaustion because I was an idiot who left her with nothing after the divorce. Sebastian continued, ignoring who was listening. And who deserves far more respect and care than she's getting here. Isabella finally found her voice. Sebastian, stop. Please, enough. But tears were already streaming down her cheeks. These weren't tears of shame, but something far more complex. Relief, confusion, fear, and perhaps, just perhaps, a glimmer of that old hope buried 3 years ago. Sir Mendoza, now the manager, was clearly nervous, probably calculating how much money people like Sebastian spent in the restaurant. If we can do something to provide Isabella with better conditions. You can, Sebastian said firmly. Let her go home for the rest of the evening. I'll cover all losses. I don't need this, Isabella weakly objected. You do need this, Sebastian looked her straight in the eyes. Because we are going to have dinner together, where you can sit comfortably, order what you really want, and talk without worrying about impressing customers. I can't, Isabella whispered. I can't do this again, Sebastian. Do what again? Trust you, she replied, and the words came out like a sob. I can't trust that you won't disappear again when you get tired of playing the savior. Sebastian felt as if every word was a blow to his heart, but he knew he deserved it. You're right, he admitted. You have every right not to trust me. I was a coward 3 years ago. I was cruel. I was everything I never should have been with you. He took a step closer, aware that everyone was watching, but he no longer cared. Isabella, learning about Diego, about how he abandoned you, about how you're struggling alone, I can't live with that. I can't wake up every day knowing the woman I love is carrying this burden alone. The woman you love? Isabella repeated, her voice mixing disbelief and pain. Now you love me? After 3 years when you knew nothing about me? After seeing me at my worst? I've loved you all these years, Sebastian confessed, his voice trembling slightly. Every day I convinced myself I did the right thing. Some part of me knew I made the biggest mistake of my life. But I was too proud, too stubborn to admit it. Isabella wiped her tears with the back of her hand, smudging her makeup a bit. And what's changed? She asked. What's changed that now you're standing here, causing a scene at my job, saying these words? What's changed, Sebastian interrupted, is that I realized I've lived 3 years as the richest but most miserable man in the country. I saw you yesterday and remembered what it means to be alive. I learned you've been betrayed by 2 men. I can't be the second man to leave you without fighting for you. The silence that followed was different, not awkward like a minute ago. It was the silence of 2 people who, for the first time in 3 years, were really looking at each other, seeing not idealized or demonized images, but the real people in front of them. Isabella, Sir Ramirez intervened softly. Would you like to take the rest of the evening off? No problems with work. Isabella looked at the manager, then at Sebastian, clearly torn between emotions. If you come with me, Sebastian said softly, it won't be like before. It won't be a millionaire saving a poor girl. It will be 2 people who hurt each other trying to figure out if they can heal together. Isabella closed her eyes for a long moment, as if gathering strength to make a decision that could change her life forever. When she opened them, there was quiet resolve in them. Give me 5 minutes to change, she finally said. Sebastian felt as if he could fly. Just dinner, Isabella quickly clarified. a conversation. That's all I'm promising. That's all I'm asking, Sebastian replied, though both knew it wasn't true. He was asking for much more. He was asking for a second chance to be the man he should have been from the beginning. He was asking for a chance to love not only Isabella but also the child she carried. He was asking for a chance to build the family he had been too foolish to appreciate the first time. As Isabella disappeared toward the staff changing room, Sebastian stood in the restaurant, realizing that the next few hours would determine his entire future life. Either he would win back the woman of his dreams, or he would lose her forever. And for the first time in 3 years, something mattered more to him than money. What mattered was winning back Isabella's heart. Sebastian carefully chose the restaurant. Little Italy, a cozy, homey place 10 minutes from Palazzo di Cristallo. It wasn't prestigious or expensive, without linen tablecloths and crystal chandeliers. It was the complete opposite of the establishments where he used to take Isabella during their marriage. It was real, authentic, a place where a pregnant woman could sit comfortably without feeling judgmental stares. Isabella came out of the changing room in maternity jeans and a simple blue cotton blouse that accentuated her green eyes in a way Sebastian had almost forgotten. Without work makeup and with her hair down, she looked younger, more vulnerable, more like the woman he had fallen in love with years ago. But she also looked exhausted. Without makeup, the dark circles under her eyes were obvious, and Sebastian noticed how every step came with an effort she tried to hide. "How did you get here?" Sebastian asked as they immediately walked along the sidewalk. "By bus," Isabella replied. Sebastian felt a pang of guilt. "How long does it take you from your apartment to the restaurant?" "An hour and a half," she admitted. "You have to transfer from one bus to another." Sebastian quickly calculated in his mind. Isabella spent 3 hours a day just commuting, on her feet, in the 7th month of pregnancy. And he got irritated if his driver was 5 minutes late. "Isabella, this is don't start," she interrupted before he could finish. "Don't start with pity about how different our lives are. If we are going to talk, if there's going to be this conversation, it has to be as equals." Sebastian nodded, though he didn't fully understand how they could be equals when such an abyss lay between their worlds. When they entered the restaurant, Sebastian immediately noticed how Isabella relaxed a bit. The atmosphere was warm and cozy, with soft music in the background and the smell of homemade Italian food in the air. The hostess, an elderly woman with a sincere smile, led them to a quiet table in the corner. "Something to drink to start?" asked the waitress, a girl in her 20s. "Water with lemon, please," Isabella replied. "And for you, sir?" Sebastian was about to order his usual vintage Cabernet at $2,000 a bottle but stopped. "Water with lemon for me too." Isabella looked at him in surprise but said nothing. When the waitress left, they sat in silence for a few minutes, studying the menu as if it were complex legal documents. Finally, Isabella spoke first. "Why now, Sebastian?" she asked, not taking her eyes off the menu. "Why, after 3 years of absolute silence, do you show up in my life right when I'm most vulnerable?" Sebastian set the menu on the table. "Because I'm a coward." Isabella looked up, surprised by his blunt honesty. "For 3 years," Sebastian continued, "I knew your number by heart. I drove past your neighborhood hundreds of times but never found the courage to stop. I started writing emails I never sent. I was in voluntary, torturous isolation because I was too proud to admit I made the biggest mistake of my life. And what's changed? Seeing you pregnant forced me to face what I'd been denying," Sebastian admitted. "It made me acknowledge that while I played the successful bachelor, you found someone else. You moved forward. You built the family I once refused. And that angered you." "It destroyed me," Sebastian admitted. "It destroyed me because I realized I lost not only a wife but the chance to be a father, to have a real family, to have something in life more important than numbers on a bank account." Sebastian paused as their food was brought. But neither of them started eating right away. "And what do you want now?" Isabella asked. "I want a chance to be the man I should have been for you. I want a chance to love not only you but the child you're carrying. I want a chance to be the father this child deserves, even if he's not mine." Isabella blinked in surprise. "You know he's not yours?" "Yes," Sebastian replied without hesitation. "And it doesn't matter. The child will grow up without a father because a coward abandoned him. If you give me a chance, I'll be the best father I can be." Tears streamed down her cheeks. Why do you want to do this? Because I love you, Sebastian answered simply. Because I spent 3 years pretending I didn't love you, and I don't want to waste another day. And because this child is part of you, which automatically makes him the most important thing in the world to me. Isabella wiped her tears with a napkin. Sebastian, this isn't a romantic movie. This is real life. Being a father to a child who's not yours, especially when his mother has been betrayed by 2 men, this isn't a romantic decision made in a restaurant. I know, Sebastian replied. That's why I'm not asking for an answer today. I'm asking for a chance to prove I'm serious. How? Sebastian took a deep breath. Let me help you during the pregnancy. Not as a millionaire savior, but as a man who loves you and wants to make sure you and the child are okay. Let me accompany you to doctor's appointments. Let me be there when the baby is born. Let me prove day by day that I won't disappear. Isabella looked at him for a long time. And if you realize it's harder than you thought? If the baby cries at night and I have postpartum depression? If the reality of family isn't as romantic as it seems now? Then we'll handle it together, Sebastian replied without hesitation. As it should have been from the beginning. Isabella finally picked up a piece of pasta and slowly began chewing, processing everything she'd heard. I have conditions, she said finally. Anything. If we are doing this, if I give you a chance, it can't be gradual. You can't be a weekend boyfriend who shows up when it's convenient. If you want to be part of our lives, you have to be fully involved from the start. Sebastian nodded immediately. What does that mean specifically? It means that when the baby is born, you'll be there when he has colic at 3 in the morning. You'll be there when diapers need changing. You'll be there when I'm exhausted, hormonal, unbearable. You'll still be there. I will, Sebastian promised. Your business? I can run my company from anywhere. Technology allows me to hold meetings virtually, sign contracts online. I have employees who can handle daily operations. Isabella smiled for the first time that evening, though a bit cautiously. Sebastian Mendoza, the obsessed workaholic, ready to work from home to change diapers? Sebastian Mendoza, the man who lost the most important woman in his life due to his work obsession, is ready to do anything not to miss a second chance, he corrected. Isabella set down her fork and looked at him directly. One chance, she said finally. I'll give you one chance. But Sebastian, if you hurt me again, if you disappear when it gets tough, if you decide this isn't what you really wanted, there won't be a third chance. Sebastian felt as if he had won the lottery and climbed Everest at the same time. A third chance won't be needed, he promised. This time, I'll do everything right. As they finished their uneaten dinner, discussing doctors, birth preparations, and future plans, Sebastian realized something fundamental. For the first time in 3 years, he felt completely happy. He hadn't signed a multi-million-dollar contract, hadn't won a business competition, hadn't acquired new real estate. He had simply regained hope for a family, and that was worth more than all the money in the world. Sebastian woke up at 5:30 the following Monday morning with a feeling he hadn't experienced in years. A real purpose. It wasn't the artificial adrenaline rush from a deal or the empty satisfaction from defeating competitors. It was something much deeper and frighteningly authentic. Responsibility for another person. Isabella had a doctor's appointment at 9 in the morning at the public clinic, and he insisted on driving her himself. Over the last 3 days since dinner, they had talked on the phone every evening, cautious but gradually warming conversations where he learned details about her pregnancy that filled him with both awe and crushing guilt for everything he had missed. He quickly showered and, for the first time in decades, didn't put on his $5,000 suit. Instead, he chose jeans and a simple cotton shirt. He wanted to look approachable, normal, like a man who could actually feel comfortable in a public clinic where Isabella received her prenatal care. His driver, Carlos, was waiting at the entrance as always, but Sebastian stopped him before he could open the Bentley's door. Carlos, today I'll drive myself, he said, heading to a more modest vehicle. Carlos looked at him as if he had announced he was flying to the moon. Sir? Carlos, Sebastian stopped. Cancel all my meetings this week. I'll be busy with personal matters. On the way to Isabella's apartment, Sebastian felt a mix of excitement and anxiety he hadn't experienced since teenage dates. His palms sweated as he drove through streets leading to a neighborhood he had never visited, to a life he hadn't even thought he might want. The San Miguel district was exactly as he had imagined, and even worse. 4-story apartment buildings with peeling paint, Small family shops with handmade signs, children playing on sidewalks because there were no parks nearby. This was the kind of place he had escaped from in his youth and vowed never to return to. But now, as he parked in front of the building where Isabella lived, he felt no contempt or pity. He felt respect for the woman who had managed to maintain her dignity and build a life in conditions that would have broken him. Apartment 3B was on the 3rd floor, and there was no elevator. Sebastian climbed the concrete stairs, noticing cracks in the walls and the smell of dampness permeating the building. When he knocked on the door, Isabella opened almost immediately, as if she had been standing by waiting. "You're early," she said, but a slight smile appeared on her face that made Sebastian's heart race. "I wanted to make sure we get there on time," he replied, and suddenly froze. Isabella was wearing a simple dark blue maternity dress that probably cost less than $30, but she looked more beautiful than he had ever remembered. Her belly was more noticeable than in the restaurant under the uniform, and her skin had that pregnancy glow he had heard about but never seen with his own eyes. "Are you ready?" he asked. Almost. Isabella disappeared into the apartment for a moment, returning with a small folder that obviously contained all her medical documents. "Are you sure you want to do this? A public clinic isn't exactly San Rafael Hospital." "Isabella," Sebastian gently took her hand. "I want to be at every doctor's appointment, every ultrasound, every important moment of this pregnancy. I don't care if it's the simplest clinic in the world." As they descended the stairs, Sebastian noticed how Isabella held onto the railing and paused briefly on each landing. His first instinct was to offer help, but something in her expression said she needed to maintain her independence. "How do you feel this morning?" he asked instead. "Fine," she replied automatically, then corrected herself. "Well, not quite. The baby was very active at night. I think he'll be a soccer player." Sebastian smiled. "Can I feel him moving?" Isabella stopped on the 2nd floor and looked at him in surprise. "You really want to?" "If you don't mind." Isabella took his hand and placed it on her belly. At first, Sebastian felt nothing but the warmth of her skin through the dress fabric. But then, as if the baby had been waiting for the introduction, he felt a clear movement under his palm. "My God," he whispered, tears in his eyes that he hadn't expected. "It's real. This is really real." "Of course it's real," Isabella laughed softly. "What did you think?" "I don't know," Sebastian admitted, keeping his hand on her belly and feeling another movement. "Part of me still couldn't believe you were becoming a mother. And now," Sebastian looked her straight in the eyes, "now I know you'll be the most amazing mother in the world, and this child the luckiest to have you." The moment was interrupted by a door opening on the 2nd floor. A woman poked her head out, saw Isabella with an unfamiliar man, and smiled. "Good morning, dear," she said in Spanish. "How's the little one today?" "Very active, Señora Garcia," Isabella replied warmly. "Sebastian, this is my neighbor, Señora Garcia." "Señora Garcia, this is Sebastian." Señora Garcia studied Sebastian with the gaze of an elderly woman who had lived long enough to assess a person's character in seconds. "So you're the famous Sebastian," she said slowly, deliberately. "Famous?" Sebastian looked at Isabella in confusion. Isabella blushed slightly. "I may have mentioned you once or twice." "More like once or twice a day," Señora Garcia corrected with a sly smile. "I hope you're a better man than she deserves, because this girl is a true treasure." "I will, Señora," Sebastian replied in perfect Spanish, surprising Isabella and Señora Garcia. "I'll do everything possible to be worthy of her." Señora Garcia nodded approvingly. "Good. And if not, the whole neighborhood will know." As they continued down to the car, Isabella looked at him curiously. "I didn't know you spoke Spanish too." "I grew up in neighborhoods like this," Sebastian admitted. "Before my business took off, before the expensive suits and cars. But it's been so long that I thought I'd forgotten. You never mentioned it when we were married." "When we were married," Sebastian sighed, "I was trying to be someone else. I tried to convince myself I'd completely left the past behind." When they reached the car, Isabella stopped, seeing the vehicle. "Is this your car?" "One of them," Sebastian admitted. "Would you prefer a taxi?" "No, it's just much more normal than I expected." "I'm trying to be more normal," Sebastian smiled, though unsure if he was succeeding. The drive to the clinic took 20 minutes. During that time, Isabella told him about her experience with the public healthcare system. Sebastian listened with growing horror to stories of missed appointments, long waits, and doctors who rushed because they had too many patients and too little time. "Why didn't you tell me how bad your medical care was?" he asked when they parked at the clinic. "And when should I have told you?" She replied. "During those 3 years we didn't talk?" Guilt washed over him like a wave. "You're right. But now that we know what we know, we could consider transferring you to a private doctor." Isabella immediately tensed. "Sebastian, we talked about this. You can't just show up and start buying solutions to all my problems." "I'm not trying to buy solutions," Sebastian objected. "I want to ensure you and the child get the best care." "And what if things don't work out between us?" Isabella asked directly. "What if in 2 months you decide this is much harder than you thought? I'll be left with private medical bills I can't pay." Sebastian paused for a moment, considering the validity of her concerns. "You're right," he finally admitted. "I didn't think about it from your perspective. What do you suggest?" "I suggest starting small," Isabella replied. "Come with me to this appointment, meet the doctor, see what my medical care really looks like. Then, if in a few weeks you still want to help with the medical part, we can discuss options." Sebastian nodded. That sounds fair. The clinic was exactly as he had imagined. Overcrowded waiting rooms, uncomfortable plastic chairs, faded posters on the walls, and the smell of disinfectant that couldn't fully mask other, less pleasant odors. Isabella checked in at reception and was told the doctor was running 45 minutes late. "Is that normal?" Sebastian asked as they sat on chairs clearly not designed for pregnant women. "Absolutely normal," Isabella replied, settling as best she could. "Sometimes I wait 2 hours." Sebastian surveyed the waiting room. There were other pregnant women, some with small children running around, others clearly with high-risk pregnancies, all patiently waiting in conditions he wouldn't tolerate for 5 minutes in a business meeting. "How do you do it?" he muttered. "How do you maintain patience, dignity, hope in a place like this?" Isabella looked at him with an expression he couldn't fully understand. "Sebastian, most women in the world get prenatal care in places like this or worse. I'm not special for having to do it. To me, you are special," he replied without thinking. Isabella said nothing, but he noticed a slight smile at the corners of her lips. When her name was finally called, Isabella rose with visible effort. It was 7.5 months. "Can I come in with you?" Sebastian asked. "Of course. It might be intense." "I'm more than ready." "Dear." Ramirez's office was small but clean, with an examination couch that had seen better days and medical equipment that, while functional, was clearly not state-of-the-art. The doctor himself was a man in his 50s with a warm smile and slightly trembling hands, probably from too much caffeine and lack of sleep. "Isabella, how are you feeling?" he asked, reviewing her chart. "And who is with you?" "This is Sebastian," Isabella replied. "He'll be involved in the pregnancy." "Dear." Ramirez looked at Sebastian with interest. "The father?" Isabella and Sebastian quickly exchanged glances. "It's complicated," Isabella finally replied. "Modern families are often complicated, Dr. Ramirez smiled. "The important thing is that the child has people who love him." Over the next 30 minutes, Sebastian watched in admiration as the doctor examined Isabella, listened to the baby's heartbeat, and took measurements, recording them in a medical chart that seemed too thin to hold all the important information about the pregnancy. "Everything looks good," the doctor finally announced. "The baby is developing normally. Your blood pressure is better than last time, and by my calculations, you have about 8 weeks left." 8 weeks, Sebastian repeated, panic in his voice. "First child?" the doctor asked with an understanding smile. "In a way," Sebastian admitted. "Don't worry. 8 weeks is enough time to prepare, especially if Isabella has a good support system." As they left the clinic, Sebastian was unusually quiet. Isabella noticed it as they walked to the car. "Is everything okay?" she asked. 8 weeks, Sebastian muttered. "In 8 weeks, you'll be a mother." "Yes," Isabella replied simply. "And if things work out between us, in 8 weeks, I'll be a father." Isabella stopped at the car, studying his expression. "Are you starting to panic?" Sebastian considered the question honestly. "By rights, I should be panicking. A week ago, my main concern was whether we'd sign the Tokyo contract. Now I'm thinking about diapers, bottles, and how to hold a newborn properly. And how do you feel about that? Sebastian looked her straight in the eyes. I feel more scared and more excited than ever in my life. Isabella smiled, the first fully sincere smile he had seen since their reunion. Good, she said. Because being a father shouldn't be easy. If it were easy, everyone would do it right. As they drove back to her apartment, Sebastian realized something fundamental. For the first time in his adult life, he was facing something that couldn't be bought, manipulated, or controlled with money and power. He would have to earn his place in this family day by day, decision by decision, moment by moment. And that thought, instead of scaring him, filled him with a determination he had never felt before. This time, he would do everything right. Because Isabella and this child deserved nothing less than his best, and he was determined to give it. Sebastian woke up at 3:47 in the morning. No alarm, from a sound he had learned to recognize immediately. Isabella breathing heavily, lying next to him. Over the last 3 weeks since he officially moved into her apartment, after discreetly renovating it to make it more comfortable, he had developed an internal radar for the slightest signs of labor starting. Are you okay? He whispered, gently turning on the nightlight. Isabella was sitting on the edge of the bed, one hand on her lower back, the other on her enormous belly. At 39 weeks, she looked like she had swallowed a basketball, but to Sebastian, she had never been more beautiful. I think it's time, she whispered. Her voice mixed excitement and pure terror. Sebastian sat up immediately, fully awake. Over the last week, he had replayed this moment in his head hundreds of times. He had read all the books on childbirth. He had attended parenting classes with Isabella. He had packed and repacked the hospital bag 3 times. How long have you been having contractions? He asked in a calm voice, though his heart was pounding like a Ferrari engine. Since midnight, she admitted. I didn't want to wake you until I was sure. Isabella, Sebastian stood up and knelt in front of her, taking her hands. You promised to wake me right away. We are in this together, remember? The last 2 months had been the most radical transformation in Sebastian's life. He had cut his work schedule in half. He had learned to cook healthy meals for pregnant women. He had painted the nursery with his own hands. He had read more books on parenting than on business strategies. But most importantly, he had learned to be truly present. Another contraction, Isabella moaned, squeezing his hands with such force that he was surprised. Sebastian glanced at the clock, timing the contraction as they had practiced. 45 seconds. How long since the last one? About 5 minutes. Isabella took a deep breath when the pain passed. It's time to go to the hospital, Sebastian declared. But Isabella stopped him as he reached for the keys. Sebastian, I need to tell you something before the baby is born. What? He sat back down in front of her, alarmed by the seriousness in her voice. These 2 months, you've been the man I always dreamed of. You've been patient when I was unbearable. You've been there for every appointment, every midnight craving, every panic moment. You've read more baby books than I have. Tears started rolling down her cheeks. But I want you to know that what you've done for me, what you've sacrificed to be here, it's more than I ever expected from anyone. Sebastian felt his heart about to burst. Isabella, I haven't sacrificed anything. I've gained everything. Another contraction, she whispered. And this time, Sebastian saw it was stronger. While he helped her breathe through the pain, he was overcome by an emotion so strong he could barely breathe himself. In a few hours, he would meet his son. Because that's what the child had become to him, his son, regardless of biology. The drive to the hospital was a mix of controlled panic and pure exhilaration. Contractions were coming every 3 minutes, and Sebastian drove with one hand, holding hers with the other. Remember what you said that night in the restaurant? Isabella asked between contractions. What exactly? I said a lot of foolish things then. Isabella laughed despite the pain. You said you wanted the chance to be the father this child deserves. I meant every word, Sebastian replied immediately. I know. And I want you to know, you already are. You've been his father from the moment you decided to stay. When they arrived at the hospital, everything turned into a whirlwind. Nurses, doctors, paperwork, rooms, beeping machines. But through all the chaos, Sebastian didn't let go of Isabella's hand for a second. Over the next 8 hours, he lived through every contraction with her. He breathed with her in the moments of pain, supported her when she was on the edge. He became her anchor in the storm that is childbirth. I see the head. The doctor shouted at 11:47 in the morning. Isabella, on the next contraction, push with all your strength. Sebastian looked where the doctor pointed and saw something that changed him forever. The baby's small head, covered in dark hair, was emerging into the world. My God, he whispered, tears streaming down his face. Isabella, I can see our baby. Our baby. She gasped. Our baby, Sebastian confirmed without hesitation. Completely ours. With one final push, accompanied by a cry of such strength Sebastian had never heard, the child fully entered the world. It's a boy, the doctor announced, and immediately the room filled with the most beautiful sound Sebastian had ever heard. The loud, healthy cry of his son. Dad, do you want to cut the umbilical cord? A nurse asked, handing him the scissors. For a second, Sebastian froze. Dad. They were calling him Dad. Go, Isabella whispered with a smile of pure light. Cut your son's umbilical cord. With trembling hands, Sebastian cut the umbilical cord, officially separating his son from Isabella's body and turning him into an independent person. 3.3 kilograms, the nurse announced after weighing. A healthy baby. When the baby was first placed in his arms, Sebastian thought his heart would simply stop. The boy was perfect. Tiny fingers immediately grasping his finger, eyes opening for a moment and looking straight at him. The face was a perfect mix of Isabella and someone else. But that no longer mattered. Hello, little one, Sebastian whispered, his voice shaking with emotion. I'm your dad. I've been waiting for you my whole life. Isabella, exhausted but radiant, reached out her arms. Give him to me. Sebastian carefully handed the baby to Isabella, and the image of the two of them together was one he knew he'd remember for life. He's perfect, she whispered, studying every feature of her son's face. What should we name him? Over the last 2 months, they had discussed dozens of names but hadn't made a final decision. How about Matteo? Sebastian suggested. It means gift from God. Isabella tried the name. Matteo Mendoza. I like it. But are you sure you want him to have your last name? Technically, Isabella, Sebastian gently interrupted. There's nothing technical here. I'm his father in every way that matters. I want the whole world to know this is my son. Tears freely rolled down Isabella's face. You know what? You're right. Matteo Mendoza sounds perfect. At that moment, as if understanding they were talking about him, the baby opened his eyes and looked straight at Sebastian. And in those dark, innocent eyes, Sebastian saw his entire future. Sleepless nights and first steps, first words and soccer games, help with homework and talks about life. He saw unconditional love, true purpose, and the chance to be the father he wished he'd had in childhood. I love you, he said to Isabella, leaning in to gently kiss her. Both of you, more than I thought I was capable of loving anyone. And we love you, Isabella whispered against his lips. Right, little one? We love Daddy. 6 months later, Sebastian sat on the floor in the living room of his new home, not the mansion he had before, but a regular family home in a safe but modest neighborhood. With Matteo on his knees, he read him a book about farm animals. And this is a cat, Sebastian said, pointing to the picture. Say cat. Matteo, now 6 months old, responded with joyful babble that Sebastian chose to interpret as a perfectly pronounced cat. Isabella entered the room with 2 cups of coffee and sat next to them on the floor. She was back to working as an art teacher at a private school, part-time, a job Sebastian had helped her find, but one she got solely on her merits. How was your day? Sebastian asked, hugging her while still holding Matteo. Amazing, Isabella smiled. My students are working on a project about non-traditional families. I couldn't help thinking about us. We are not a traditional family, Sebastian laughed. Absolutely not, Isabella laughed. A millionaire who left his company to be a full-time dad, an art teacher who fell in love twice with the same man, and a baby with the most devoted father in the world, despite not being his biological one. Sebastian looked at Matteo, who was now happily drooling on the animal book. You know what? You're right. We are completely non-traditional. And I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. Not even your old luxurious life without worries? Especially not that, Sebastian replied without hesitation. My old life was empty. I had everything money could buy and nothing that really mattered. Isabella leaned against him. And what really matters? Sebastian looked around his living room, which was in complete disarray. Toys, parenting books, and little evidences of a real, lived life. He looked at Isabella, with paint stains on her hands from work, her hair disheveled from chasing a 6-month-old. He looked at Matteo, who was now joyfully slobbering on the animal book. This, he said simply. This chaotic, imperfect, completely unpredictable life. This is the family we built together. This is love that's more real than anything I've ever felt. Even when Matteo wakes us every 2 hours. Isabella joked. Especially then, Sebastian laughed. Because those 2 a.m. hours when he cries and we get up together to soothe him, when we act as a team caring for him, those are the moments I feel truly alive. Isabella stood up and reached for Matteo. Come here, little one. Time for dinner. As Isabella fed Matteo, Sebastian watched them with a feeling of gratitude so strong it nearly overwhelmed him. 3 years ago, he was the richest and most miserable man in the country. He had everything he thought he wanted and nothing he really needed. Now, technically, he had less money. He had sold most of his holdings and put much of his fortune into trusts for Matteo and charities. He had less power in business. He had delegated most daily operations to his company. And definitely less free time. But he was incomparably richer in every way that truly mattered. What are you thinking about? Isabella asked, noticing his thoughtful expression. I'm thinking, Sebastian replied, about how close I came to losing all this a second time. What do you mean? That night in the restaurant, when I saw you for the first time in 3 years, I had a choice to just leave. I could have pretended I didn't recognize you, paid the bill, and walked out of your life forever. Isabella froze. Did you think about that? For about 2 seconds, Sebastian admitted. My first instinct was to run because seeing you made me realize how empty my life was without you. And what made you stay? Sebastian smiled, remembering the moment that changed everything. I saw you holding your back because it hurt, and I realized that no matter how uncomfortable it was for me to see you, I couldn't leave knowing you were struggling alone. I didn't even know about Diego then. So no. But I knew something was wrong. And more than that, I knew I still loved you. I lied to myself about it for 3 years, but the moment I saw you, I knew I had never stopped loving you. Isabella finished feeding Matteo and laid him on her shoulder to burp him. You know what's the craziest part of all this? What? Diego leaving was the best thing that could have happened to me. Sebastian looked at her in surprise. How can you say that? Because if he hadn't left me, I wouldn't have been working in that restaurant that night. I wouldn't have seen you again. We wouldn't have gotten this second chance. Isabella approached Sebastian and sat on his lap, holding the sleeping Matteo. And more importantly, she continued, if he hadn't left me, I would never have known I could survive on my own. When we first got married, I depended on you for everything. You were my support. And now I know I can take care of myself and Matteo if needed. That means I'm with you because I want to be, not because I need to. And that makes our love so much stronger. Sebastian gently kissed her, careful not to wake Matteo. I love you, Isabella. You and this little miracle. More than words can express. And we love you, Isabella whispered against his lips. Forever. As the sun set outside their living room windows, painting everything in golden tones, Sebastian realized he had found what he had been searching for his whole life without even knowing it. True purpose, unconditional love, and deep satisfaction from being exactly where he was meant to be. He had spent decades chasing business success, accumulating wealth, building an empire to impress the world. But it turned out that true wealth isn't measured by numbers on a bank account. It's measured by moments like this. A sleeping baby in the arms of the beloved woman in a home full of laughter and love, with the certainty that tomorrow he would wake up and relive it all again.